All right, for more on Lou Reed and the significance of his music, we go to Alan Cross. He's a music broadcaster, and he joins us now from Oakville, Ontario. Alan, thanks for being with us. Such an incredible loss. Remind us again why Lou Reed had such a big impact on music.
Lou Reed started making music in 1957, and then in the early 60s he had some sort of artistic epiphany, which led him and John Cale to form the Velvet Underground. The Velvet Underground didn't sell very many records when they were around. There's a saying that goes that they sold maybe 1,000 albums, but every single one of those people who bought an album ended up becoming very influential in terms of music. Back then, 67, 68, 69, the Velvet Underground was singing about things that nobody else was singing about. Well, the rest of the rock and roll world was all about cars and girls and trying to get a date and that sort of thing. The Velvet Underground was singing about weird stuff. They were singing about sex and drugs and life on the street and just all kinds of weirdness. And that was a real shock to the system. It wasn't necessarily what the mainstream really wanted to hear, but there was an underclass of rock and rollers who wanted something more real and more authentic, and the Velvet Underground really appealed to them. Some of the people who found this music interesting included David Bowie. It included Patti Smith. It included Iggy Pop. It included the Pixies and R.E.M. and dozens of other bands who would follow in their wake, basically resulting in the formation of what we would call alternative music. So it's very hard to overstate what effect the Velvet Underground eventually had with their music.
Yeah, they truly seemed like the first real underground. Alan, what current musical acts do you hear Lou Reed's influence in?
Oh, just about anything. Anything that considers themselves alternative rock you can draw a line all the way back to Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground. I mean, even Lou Reed's last album will go down in history as Lulu, which is a record he made with Metallica. There's anybody that you can think of in today's rock and roll world owes a debt of gratitude to him.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing to think that he could be the epicenter for so much. Why do you think his music continues to resonate with modern audiences?
The authenticity, the streetness of it. There's a grittiness, and you know, and there's a certain simplicity to it. One of his favorite sayings was that, you know, you can do with one guitar chord, two guitar chords maybe, but three, you're approaching jazz. So, you know, he was that sort of simplistic, authentic, streetwise stuff will always have appeal in the rock and roll world.
Alan, I want to ask you about your own relationship with Lou Reed's music. Was his music important to you personally?
Absolutely. I think I might have been one of those people who bought a record back in about 1972, 73, trying to figure out what this was all about. And I didn't understand it. It took me many, many years to understand it. And it wasn't until I realized that guys like David Bowie and Iggy Pop were fans, and I was fans of both those artists, that I realized that maybe I better go back and study what was all about, what the Velvet Underground was all about. And then that leads you to, you know, Lou Reed and John Cale and Nico and the whole Andy Warhol crowd and what was going on in New York in the middle 60s. And that was a very fertile time for all sorts of art, pretty freaky art, but that's the kind of thing that began to dominate certain scenes when we get to the punk explosion of the mid-1970s. There was a magazine, for example, in New York called Punk Magazine, and the very first person they put on the cover was Lou Reed. And so many things came from Lou's influence, you know, the New York Dolls, the Ramones, I mentioned Patti Smith earlier, television. All these elements of Lou went into creating the punk rock explosion in New York, and then via the Ramones, the punk rock explosion in the United Kingdom. So, you know, if you got to, you know, start taking things back to a big bang, to somebody who really lit the fuse, you're going to have to, you probably will end up talking about Lou.
Yeah, incredibly transformative. 71 seems too young. Alan, I got to say, it's really great to hear your voice. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Anytime.
That is radio broadcaster and music historian Alan Cross.